Welcome to our deep dive into large language models.
LLMs.
Yes,
It's
LLMs.
going to be a good one.
It really is.
We're going way beyond just like chatting with AI, you know?
Right.
Like we're going to unlock some seriously powerful applications using APIs.
APIs, I mean, what even is an API?
Yeah, so an API, you can think of it like a bridge.
Okay.
It lets different software programs talk to each other.
Right.
And, when it comes to LLMs, this is how we can move beyond, just simple prompts and responses and start to build these complex systems where the LLM can interact with external tools and data.
That's right. And you were talking about this before, but
Yeah.
I was reading deeplearning.ai's research, and they're calling these agentic workflows.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much they can boost an LLM's performance, like GPT 3.5, with a well-designed workflow.
Really?
Can almost reach GPT-4 level.
It's true.
Like, what kind of real-world applications can we build with that?
Oh, man, it's a game changer.
Like, imagine an LLM that can not only analyze financial data, but it can actually pull real-time stock prices,
Wow.
compare it to historical trends,
Okay.
and then generate a personalized investment report for you.
Yeah.
I mean, that level of automation and insight was unthinkable until recently.
It is incredible to think that we can build systems where the LLM acts almost like an autonomous analyst,
Yeah.
pulling together information from all these different sources
Yeah.
and actually making decisions based on that data.
Yeah, that's the power.
It is. But I am curious.
It's
Isn't it tricky dealing with all the different APIs out there? I mean, even if they're trying to align with OpenAI standard,
Yeah.
there are always these variations.
You're right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. Like,
What is
you
it?
have platforms like Grok and Anthropic.
Oh.
They have their own unique implementations.
Right.
So the key takeaway here is that understanding these nuances is crucial for developers.
Yeah.
It's like learning the local dialect before traveling to a new country.
It's essential for effective communication.
So before we get into building these complex systems,
Yeah.
let's get back to basics for a moment.
Okay, love it.
What are the essential parameters that I need to understand when I'm working with LLM APIs?
So there are two fundamental ones,
Okay.
model and messages.
Okay.
So the model parameter is pretty straightforward. It's where you specify which LLM you want to use.
Okay.
Like, are you going to use GPT 3.5 or GPT 4?
Right.
But the messages parameter.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
It's essentially a log
Okay.
of the entire conversation history.
Right.
And it's divided into roles like system user, assistant, even tools used.
Okay.
And this entire history is what the model processes each time it generates a response.
So the model isn't just responding to my last message.
No,
It's taking the entire context of the conversation into account.
the entire context is right.
That makes sense for maintaining coherence,
Yes,
but it also seems like it could get computationally expensive pretty quickly.
it's true. Context window size is a crucial factor in LLM performance and cost.
Right.
But this approach allows for a much deeper level of interaction and understanding
Okay.
than just simple one-shot prompts.
Yeah.
And here's something to consider.
Okay.
In the future,
Yeah.
these messages could be more than just text.
Okay.
Like, imagine multimodal LLMs processing images,
Whoa.
audio, even video, all within the same conversation.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay, so let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. We'll
Right.
stick with the text-based world for now.
Okay.
What are some of the other important parameters that I can use to fine-tune the LLM's behavior?
So one of the most important ones is max tokens.
Okay.
This controls the length of the response that you get back from the model.
Okay.
Then there's temperature,
Okay.
which you can think of as the creativity dial.
Okay.
A lower temperature gives you more predictable, factual responses,
Okay.
while a higher temperature makes the output more random
More creative.
and, well, creative.
So if I'm building a chatbot for customer service, I probably want to keep the temperature pretty low
Yes,
to avoid any unexpected tangents.
exactly.
But if I'm using the LLM to generate poetry or storylines, a higher temperature might be more appropriate.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And then there's also top, which is another way to control the randomness of the output.
Okay.
But it focuses on the probability distribution of potential tokens.
Right.
So this gives you finer control over the range of responses the model might generate.
Okay.
Then there are parameters like frequency penalty and presence penalty,
Okay.
which help to ensure that the responses are more varied and interesting by discouraging the model from repeating the same words or phrases too often.
That's incredibly useful.
It is.
It sounds like there's a lot of control we have over the LLM's output. with these parameters.
There it is.
Are there any others that are particularly important?
Yeah, one that can be really powerful is legit bias. This lets you directly influence the model's choice of words by boosting or suppressing the likelihood of specific tokens appearing in the output.
Okay.
Like, for example, let's say you're building a chatbot for a brand,
Okay.
and they want to maintain a very positive and upbeat tone.
Right.
You could use logit bias to make the model more likely to use positive words and phrases
Right.
while discouraging it from using negative ones.
So I could essentially fine-tune the model's personality to match the specific needs of my application.
You got it.
That's really cool. What about telling the LLM to stop generating text after a certain point or generating multiple responses to the same prompt? Are there parameters for that?
Yes, absolutely. So the stop parameter lets you define specific sequences that will cause the model to stop generating text.
Okay.
This is useful for controlling the length of responses or preventing the model from rambling on.
Right.
And then the end parameter
Okay.
lets you specify how many different responses you want the model to generate for the same prompt. So this is useful for exploring different creative options or generating variations on a theme.
Okay.
And lastly, there's user, which lets you include your user ID,
Okay.
something that OpenAI recommends for good production practices.
Okay. This is a lot to digest.
It is a lot.
But it's clear that these parameters provide incredible flexibility and control when working with LLMs.
They do.
But before we get too deep into the coding, I think it's important to step back and talk about the different ways we can actually connect to these LLMs.
Okay.
What are our options?
So there are three main ways.
Okay. So we've talked about all these amazing things we can do with LLMs and how to fine-tune their behavior.
Right.
But this is all kind of happening behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually present this information to users in a way that's engaging and user-friendly?
Yeah.
I mean, seeing like raw code or text outputs
Right.
isn't exactly the most exciting experience.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. It's not enough for LLMs to just process information.
Right.
They need to present it effectively as well.
Right.
And luckily, LLMs can generate responses in Markdown,
Right.
which can then be easily converted to HTML for display in web applications.
Okay.
So this lets you leverage the power of formatting, styling, and interactive elements
Right.
to create truly engaging user experiences.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I imagine things can get a bit tricky when we factor in streaming and the dynamic nature of LLM responses.
Sure.
We're not dealing with static content here.
You're absolutely right. There are some unique challenges for one.
Yeah.
Constantly formatting and displaying a stream of text can impact the performance of your application,
Okay.
especially if the LLM is generating a lot of output.
So what's the best way to handle this? Should we just avoid formatting altogether until the entire response is generated?
Not necessarily a common approach is to process the incoming data in small chunks,
Okay.
formatting and displaying only the most recent updates.
Right.
So this kind of strikes a balance between real-time feedback
Right.
and maintaining a smooth user experience.
That's a clever solution.
Yeah.
But it's not just text that we need to worry about, right?
Right.
LLMs can generate all sorts of complex content like code tables, even mathematical formulas.
Exactly. And thankfully, there are tools and libraries specifically designed to handle these different formats.
Okay.
For instance, you have libraries like Marked or Highlight.js
Okay.
that can help with Markdown and code formatting.
Right.
And then you have tools like Mermaid and MarkMap that can generate diagrams directly from LLM output.
Wow.
And some platforms like Vercel's AI SDK even offer features like generative UI
Okay.
for creating dynamic components on the fly.
It's amazing to see how the tooling around LLMs is evolving so quickly. It seems like there's a solution for almost every use case.
Almost.
But even with these tools, streaming seems like it could complicate things,
It can.
especially with markdown elements that need to be opened and closed properly.
You've hit on another key point. Ensuring that markdown elements like code blocks and lists are handled correctly during streaming is essential for avoiding rendering issues.
Right.
You also need to consider things like allowing users to interrupt the streaming process
Okay.
or preventing constant updates from interfering with text selection and copying.
So there are definitely a lot of nuances to consider when presenting LLM output.
RAR.
In a user-friendly way, are there any general best practices you would recommend for developers?
So one common pattern is to handle the communication with the LLM on the server side.
Okay.
This not only keeps your API keys secure,
Right.
but it also allows you to perform any necessary validation or pre-processing before sending data to the client.
Okay.
And then on the front end, you can store both the raw and formatted output.
Right.
updating the display as new chunks arrive from the server.
That sounds like a solid approach.
Yeah.
Keeping the sensitive stuff on the server and handling the presentation logic on the client side makes a lot of sense from both a security and performance perspective.
For sure.
Speaking of security,
Yes.
this feels like a good time to transition into that topic.
Okay.
I imagine there are some unique concerns when working with LLMs and code.
Absolutely. LLMs are powerful,
Right,
but they're still relatively new, and we're still learning about the potential security risks.
right.
Their non-deterministic nature, early stage of development, and reliance on natural language, which is less precise than programming languages,
Yeah.
all contribute to these risks.
So where do we even begin with securing these systems? What are some essential things that developers should keep in mind?
So first and foremost, data privacy is paramount.
Okay.
Always treat anything that goes into a prompt as potentially public information,
Okay.
especially when using commercial models.
Right.
Explore enterprise plans or services that offer secure cloud environments to protect sensitive data.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't throw sensitive data into a publicly available model without understanding the potential risks.
Exactly.
What about those prompt injection attacks I've been hearing about?
Yeah.
It sounds like hackers are finding ways to manipulate LLM prompts for malicious purposes.
Prompt injection is a serious concern. It's where malicious users try to manipulate your prompts to get the LLM to perform unintended actions.
Okay, like what?
Like, imagine a user entering a prompt that tricks the LLM into revealing confidential information or executing harmful code.
That's scary stuff.
It can be.
So how do we prevent this from happening?
So the key is to never blindly trust user input.
Right.
Always validate and sanitize any data coming from the user before passing it to the LLM.
Okay.
Think of it like filtering out impurities before sending water through a delicate machine.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, and you also want to set limits on API usage to prevent runaway costs.
Right.
And implement rate limiting and other security measures
Okay.
to protect your endpoints from abuse.
So it's all about being proactive
Yeah.
and having layers of protection in place.
Layers, absolutely.
What about the LLM output itself? Can that pose a security risk as well?
Absolutely. It's crucial to moderate both input and output to prevent the generation or dissemination of harmful or inappropriate content.
Okay.
LLMs can be unpredictable.
Right.
And even with the best intentions, they might generate something offensive or biased based on the data they were trained on.
So even if our prompts are secure,
Yeah.
we can't just assume the output will be safe for public consumption.
That's right.
It seems like constant vigilance and careful monitoring are crucial when working with LLMs.
Exactly. It's also important to remember that LLMs are tools, not oracles.
Right.
Never rely solely on them for critical tasks, especially those with potential legal or ethical implications.
Okay.
Human oversight and verification are crucial components of any system that incorporates LLMs.
This makes me think about the bigger picture. It's not just about building cool applications. It's
Right.
about building them responsibly and understanding the broader impact they might have on individuals and society as a whole.
You've hit on a crucial point. As developers and innovators, we have a responsibility to ensure that the technology we create is used ethically.
Right.
And for the benefit of humanity,
Yeah.
we need to be mindful of potential biases, the impact on employment, and the potential for misuse.
This has been a really insightful conversation.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the nuts and bolts of LLM APIs
Yeah.
to the complexities of presenting output and the critical importance of security and ethical considerations.
For sure.
It's clear that LLMs offer incredible possibilities, but it's also clear that we need to approach this technology with caution and a deep understanding of its potential impact.
I agree. LLMs are powerful tools, but they're still tools.
Right.
It's up to us to use them wisely
Yeah.
and to shape their future in a way that benefits everyone.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
there's one thing I'm still curious about.
Okay.
We've talked about choosing the right LLM for the job,
Right.
using parameters to fine-tune its behavior. But is it ever beneficial to use multiple LLMs in a single application? Is that even possible?
It's not only possible, it's becoming increasingly common.
Really?
The concept is called routing and combining models,
Okay.
and it can be a powerful technique for optimizing performance, reducing costs, and even improving accuracy.
So instead of relying on a single LLM for everything, we
Right.
can strategically use different models for different tasks.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly efficient. Like,
Yes.
how does that even work?
So, for example, you might use a smaller, faster model for simple tasks, like text classification,
Okay.
while reserving a larger, more powerful model for more complex tasks like code generation or
Yeah.
creative writing.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having a team of specialists, each with their own strengths and expertise.
Right.
But how do you decide which model to use for which task? It seems like there could be a lot of trial and error involved.
Well, choosing the right model depends on several factors, including the task's complexity, the desired accuracy,
Right.
the latency requirements, and of
Ah,
course the cost of each model.
okay. Yeah.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
But there are tools emerging to help automate this process.
Oh, really?
For example, the Root LLM project
Okay.
uses a machine learning model to classify queries and route them to the most appropriate LLM.
So you're using an LLM to manage other LLMs.
That's right.
That's pretty meta.
It is.
It really highlights the rapid evolution of this field and the potential for creating incredibly sophisticated systems.
For sure.
But I'm curious, are there any situations where using multiple LLMs might not be the best approach?
Yeah, there are certainly trade-offs to consider.
Okay.
Managing multiple models adds complexity to your system.
Right.
And it requires careful orchestration to ensure they work together seamlessly.
Right.
You need to think about things like data consistency,
Okay.
error handling, and how to handle situations where one model might fail or produce unexpected results.
Right.
So in some cases, a single well-tuned model
Yeah.
might still be the simplest and most effective solution.
Okay, so routing and combining models is a powerful technique,
It is.
but it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
It sounds like there's a lot to consider before diving into that level of complexity.
There is.
Speaking of complexity, we talked earlier about streaming LLM responses
Yeah.
to provide real-time feedback to users.
Right.
I imagine this can be especially challenging when dealing with long-running processes.
You're absolutely right. LLMs can take time to generate responses,
Right. Well,
especially for complex tasks.
right.
And you don't want your users staring at a blank screen
Bro.
while they wait for the output.
Of course not.
Streaming's a great way to address this,
Yeah.
providing users with a sense of progress and keeping them engaged.
We also talked about some of the potential downsides of streaming,
Right.
like the difficulty of moderating content in real time
Yeah.
and the challenges of handling placeholders and markdown elements correctly.
Yeah, those are real challenges.
Are there any alternative approaches for handling long-running LLM processes?
Yes. In some cases, using events or a more traditional request-response pattern might be a better fit.
Okay.
For example, you could use a background process to generate the LLM response and then send a notification to the user when the process is complete.
Okay.
Or you could break the task down into smaller asynchronous steps,
Right.
providing updates to the user at each stage.
So the best approach depends on the specific needs of the application and the user experience you're trying to create.
Exactly.
It's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
That's right.
Speaking of choosing the right tool,
Yeah.
we've talked about the importance of structured responses.
Right.
Can you elaborate on why that's so crucial when building LLM-powered applications?
Sure, structured responses, whether in JSON or YAML format,
Okay.
make it significantly easier to integrate LLMs into your application logic.
Okay.
They provide a clear and consistent format for parsing data,
Right.
which is essential for building robust and reliable systems.
So instead of just getting a blob of text back from the LLM,
Right.
we can get data that's organized and ready to be used in our code.
Exactly.
That seems like a no-brainer.
It is.
But are there any challenges in getting LLMs to reliably generate structured responses?
Well, while most platforms offer features like JSON mode or structured output
Okay.
to enforce the output format, it's important to remember that LLMs are still prone to errors.
Right.
They might generate incorrect values or deviate from the expected structure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's crucial to always validate and sanitize the output
Right.
before using it in your application.
So it's like with any other data source,
Right.
we can't just blindly trust it.
Exactly.
We need to have checks and balances in place.
Absolutely.
I'm sensing a common theme here.
Yeah.
Careful planning, thoughtful implementation, and a healthy dose of skepticism
Right.
are crucial when working with LLM.
I couldn't agree more.
This has been an incredible journey into the world of LLM APIs.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the fundamental concepts to the practical challenges and the ethical considerations.
It's a lot to think about.
It's clear that LLMs are transforming the technological landscape,
Yeah.
and it's exciting to imagine what the future holds.
It's a brave new world.
It really is. It's been a pleasure having you here.
It's been a pleasure being here.
To share your insights and explore this fascinating field with me and our listeners.
Absolutely.
And to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has empowered you to unlock the incredible potential of LLMs
I hope so too.
and to build innovative and responsible applications that leverage the power of this transformative technology.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with artificial intelligence.